Hello, so welcome to this bonus content for Unit 8. Today I'm going to be covering an engine modification to the RPG project, the XNA RPG project, and also talking a little bit about the project. And I figured I'd talk about the project first, just in case you're not feeling like watching the engine part. As far as the project goes, this is going to be released next week. And it's going to actually be due, it's going to have a extended, Game Project 2 is going to be extended by a week. Actually, not a week, mind you, 3 days. So basically, Game Project 1 is now due on the 25th, which is today. Game Project 2 will be due on May 9th. And then we're kind of adjusting the intro to the app mini project, and that's going to be take place of the assignment on week 10, so that's going to be an optional thing. And the app project will actually be due 3 days later as well on the, well, that's going to be the, I think like something like the 1st of June. Yeah, sounds about right. Or no, the 30th of May. So everything's being extended by 3 days basically. And that's where we're at, and basically the Game Project 2, just so you get kind of a preview of it, you're going to be able to go in 3 separate directions. It's going to be concerning the RPG kit, and basically you're going to create your own RPG. So there's going to be 3 separate directions you can take on this to get full credit. You can do a full modification. This would be art heavy, your own characters, your own maps. Obviously this is going to be a bit code heavy too, because you're going to have to do the technicality of breaking up those sprite sheets and figuring out exactly what sizes all those images need to be, but it shouldn't be too bad considering that all the stuff was provided for us in the first place. So for example, the textures are all here. You've got like the various HUD elements, you've got the game screens, the characters, you know, the walk sheet for the goblin. You know, obviously, if you end up having some of Microsoft's original existing art in here, that's fine, even if you're going to modify it a little bit or something like that. Just basically, I'll have the full requirements down and talk about inside the project write-up. I'll talk about exactly how many characters are needed to get full credit and how many custom maps are needed. But nonetheless, that's a pretty art-heavy direction to go. The second direction you can take is a code-heavy direction. So this would be, for example, AI that follows. So you'd be basically extending the existing game. You'd be creating AI that follows you on the screen, which I'm going to show you how to start on that today. You'd be creating perhaps different combat mechanics. For example, right now it's all based on turn-based, and you select and you attack, and then there's a certain random number that's generated to control the damage. You could change those mechanics and those rules, and basically make it slightly different, like say have a curve on the damage, for example, or something like that. And there's plenty of other ways you can modify the combat mechanics as well. Another thing you could do is you could make it so it's a first-person view of combat. This is similar to Phantasy Star. So that's something you could do. That would be kind of a pretty big code task as well to achieve. Other things you can do are you could implement stores. Right now, they don't really have a store system in place. They've got the ability to get things, contents and chests and things like that. So you can kind of use that as a baseline for how you could create a simple store, but it is going to be pretty complex. You could also implement AI that tracks you down. So enemy NPCs. And maybe you could implement branching storylines. These are just a few of the things you could do. I'm going to have more later. Quest mod is basically create the entire story yourself using the existing assets. So this would be all quests rewritten, maybe somewhere between at least 30 minutes of quest-based gameplay. So that's going to be the longest one, perhaps up to 1 hour. I gotta determine how much realistically we can expect from the quest mod, but the quest mod people is basically going to be comprised of the people that really want to have a killer story and you know, your own enemies and that kind of thing. However, you can use the existing art in this case, and mainly you're going to be delving into XML files, kind of like I showed you last time with the quest files. The quest files, for example, are here. These are you know, defeat Tamar, hide armor, etc. You'd be mainly living in XML land, as well as placement, of course, is very important in this particular option. Placement of treasures. So those are the three directions you can go. And basically, if you do the full art mod with your own characters, your own maps, etc., you're going to have to do less questing stuff. If you do the code-heavy version, you really don't have to do anything with questing or the art. All you have to do is these custom implementations, one of which I'm going to start to show you today. The other day I showed you the questing stuff, where you basically create your own story. So these are the three directions you're going to be able to go, and I'll give you more of that information next week. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at how to follow characters on the screen. And first I'm going to show you what I've been able to put together, just so you get a preview of where we're going from here. So I'm just loading up my game project here. It should just be a second to load. So as you can see here, I'm just about to load it up, and here we go. We've got new game. I'm just going to select the basic changes that I've made is to the following logic of the NPCs. So there is now following logic, and they will kind of follow behind you. So the first NPC that comes up is Shednar the Wise, and he comes up down here, and he will come and follow after me, sort of Phantasy Star style or what have you, or Dragon Warrior. I've got his follow distance set at 32, so it's pretty close behind you that he'll come. So now if you have multiple party members following you, I put some stuff in so that it kind of adjusts, but you have to finish that work because I didn't want to do the whole job for you. So this just sort of gets you started on the code modifications that are going to be required for Game Project 2. It just doesn't really get you the whole way. So let's go ahead and show you how this was scripted up. Or coded up, I should say. Alright, so now I'm back to the original project without those changes, and I'm going to be adding them back in. These are the changes that were made, the high-level comparison. A lot of stuff to session.cs, a lot of stuff to player position CS, tile engine CS, a little bit to character CS, player CS, so we're kind of all over the place, as well as there's some additional changes inside of player to the XML files for Kolat, Nakias, Shenid, Vashek, and etc. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll kind of explain step by step what the what's going on. So with the player, what we did was we basically had a no, I'm not gonna, never mind, we'll get back to that in a second. Alright, where I'm going to start actually is in the tile engine. This was the first place I started when I started doing this, so it kind of makes sense to show you this first. The tile engine is basically what's responsible for moving the party around. They've already done some stuff for us. They've got a party leader position, which is a player position. And by the way, a player position is a class in of itself, which has a tile position as well as a tile offset, which is the position inside of the tile, and then a screen position, which basically gets the tile position plus the tile offset, and that's the official tile position. It also has a direction in it and the ability to perform movement. We've got a move function here that does the actual moving. So player position is kind of an important thing, and what we're going to want to do is basically anywhere that the player is moving, we want to follow behind the player. So the way that I coded this up, originally I was thinking of doing a breadcrumb type solution where I lay points out and the characters follow those points. Instead, what I went ahead and did was I implemented a seek player type mechanic, which basically follows behind the player at a certain distance. And in that sense, what I'm doing is I'm basically going to be saying, okay, the first guy behind the player is a certain distance, then the next one is maybe twice that distance, then 3 times that distance, so on and so forth. So what I did was I added some follow variables. Here's the follow variables that I added. Follow increment, which is going to be basically for how fast we want the player to move, and that increment can be, that's just a scalar increment that's going to be basically multiplied, or not, or I shouldn't say multiplied out. It's basically just going to follow at 3 times each additional character that's following is going to be an additional 3 units behind the other player. And then we have a fault tolerance that's initially set to 32. So the next character behind that would be 35, and so on and so forth. That's what I've kind of envisioned. I don't have that full code implemented here. I've got it implemented partially so that it can have all players following behind the character, but I've only completed it for the second person, so the person right behind the player, just because I didn't want to go and do the whole thing for you. There's just some stuff for you to fill out there. As I mentioned here, we might want an additional incremental scalar for follow tolerance greater than 1 player, and basically just to do this you can copy what I've done with the follow increment scalar up here, and you'll see how that works in a bit. Next thing I had to do was I created a NPC player positions dictionary item. So basically the party leader position is, if you do a quick search on this, you'll see what I mean. This thing is used all over the place to actually give us the position that we're going to be drawing. So for example, it's used in session to reset the animation. It's used down here for the loading the session result, for reading it in. It's used literally all over the place. And this is basically, this is checking if the leader can move. This is basically the position that we want to be storing our data for the player, and we are using it for that purpose. So what we want to do is we want to mimic that. We have the ability to create player positions right here. So here's one create for the player. We're going to want to create one for each additional NPC player. So a dictionary, by the way, a dictionary is a really simple sort of device. All it does is it takes a name, for example, and it maps something to it. So let's say we were talking about phone numbers, and Bob's phone number was 669 or 669-5000 or something, and Jill's was 6550909 or something like that. It basically maps a name to a number. So when I'm looking up Bob, then I get the number 669-5000. When I'm looking up Jill, I get the number 6550909. When I'm looking up Kent, I get 52 blah blah blah. You get the idea. So that's basically the idea of a dictionary, and we're going to map named NPCs to positions, because I'm going to want to traverse through this list, and for each NPC, I want to actually update that NPC. Now the next major change that I made was in the set map position, or set map function, method, what have you. We need to actually add to this new vector, or this new dictionary that we've created. So the new dictionary that we've created, after we get the new map in, we want to insert. So we're going to say if new map dot player NPC entries not equal null. So in other words, if it has entries, then we want to add those entries. I'll make sure I copied everything here. Yes, okay. So if new map dot player NPC entries not equal null, then for each player entry that's in new map dot NPC entries. So new map is the map file. The map file, remember, is an XML that has a bunch of player NPC entries. So for each one of those, we're going to add that to this dictionary that we made. And the key is going to be the name, and the player position is going to be the value. So each one of these is going to have a player position that we can traverse later and use for updating the new positions of the NPCs. So this next part here basically updates the that dictionary entry with the tile position that we've just created to be equal to the player entry dot map position. So that's the map position of that came in from the XML. Now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to add code that moves those players to these positions, and I'm going to do that down in, let's see, where was it again? Down in update, and below or above where the player is moved. So I'm gonna, by the way, you can, if you know the name of a function you need to modify, you can easily just click it here and then go to update. And so basically here we see that we've got an update, which is basically saying check for auto movement and then move the party. And then this one actually moves the party leader, which is the player character, and updates the map origin position so that the boundaries are within the viewport and whatnot. We actually want to move, we're going to move the other guys first before we move the player. And here's what that code looks like. It's quite a bit of code, so let's go through this line by line. So for each map entry, called player entry in tile engine map.player NPC entries, then basically this position scaler is going to be used later to set up the follow increment so that we can modify the vector that goes towards the character that we're moving to. Just so basically we can offset that to have the additional NPCs move at a slower rate. So for now, we're going to move towards the player. Maybe later we'll implement kind of a breadcrumb type situation, but for now we're just going to move towards them, and that should work pretty fine. So first off, if that NPC, if this player entry that's in the map is inside of our NPC player positions, then we're going to basically compute the distance just using a straight up vector distance function, which basically takes and subtracts the screen position of the party leader minus the current NPC player position that we're looking at, gives us a floating point value back. We're going to compare to see if that is greater than the follow tolerance. If it is, then we're going to move towards that player, and to do that we get a direction vector that goes towards the player. So I don't know how much you remember from your math, but the way these vectors work is basically if you have the player position up here and if you have the NPC's position down here, the vector is what represents this line between the two. And we need to compute what that line is because that's the direction that we want to move in. And to compute that, it's rather simple. We can just subtract it using vector math. And they have a vector math function built in for us, so we don't even need to do all the math functionality of this, and that mathematical function, the subtraction of player position minus NPC position, gives us direction going in this fashion, in this direction. So that's the direction towards the player. And we're basically going to then say that the NPC player position of that content name should be moved by that direction. And then I'm going to scale this by a speed, basically. And that speed is going to be higher for additional characters. And that my intent is that that way there's some variation in the movement. And actually I think that this should be, the position scaler should probably start higher. I'll leave this for you to fix. If I indeed want the closer characters to move faster, then what I would want to do is make this a big number and make it decrementing. I would want to put a minus equals here instead of a plus equal. That's just this whole thing might not be needed. This is just sort of a hint towards how you will do the incremental follow distance calculation for the additional NPCs past 1. I needed to basically put something in here, and we'll actually leave something out is more like it, so it would be enough for you to figure out for your code mod for project 2. So that is that. We multiply that out, and that's my move direction, and I call the move function. The move function is, if I go to the player position, this is the one that actually does the calculating of the movement and setting of the direction. So that's a very important function call. You need to have that. Another thing that I determined that I had to do was I have to reset the animation when I stop. So basically when this guy stops, we want to, first off, we made a new function called stop, which I haven't defined yet, so it's giving me a little red underline. I also want to change my character state to idle and call stop so he starts idling, so he starts playing the idle animation again. You'll notice from when I played it, he was actually kind of idling. Earlier, before I put this in, he would just stop, like a dead stop, and play no extra animations, no idle animations. So that's not what we want. And I put this in because basically if the content reset animation hasn't already been set, then we're going to set it so it isn't set again. That's just a standard design pattern way of doing this, and basically then we just say that this reset anim flag is false when we're moving, and then when we stop moving, this becomes a true statement, and we set this to true, and it only happens once per time that we stop moving. This is a redundant line. You could get rid of that if you wanted to. Reset animation is important here. You need that, and as I said, you need this reset anim thing here, down here. So that is about it for the tile engine. We might end up coming back to that a little bit later, but for now, let's move on. I'm going to move into player. Since I've got currently a reset anim thing that's not being set, I'd like to fix that, and this is a very easy thing to add. We're just adding a new bool in here. I put it below the gold. So I'm going to go to player. First off, I'm going to save that. Save early, save often is my rule. I'm going to go to player. Not finding it right offhand, so I'm going to use the good old player.cs. There we go. And current stats, initial data. Here's gold. I'm going to put it right after this. Now, one thing that happened is because I added this, all of these are being tracked currently in the XML and tied to the XML, which is kind of a useful feature. And I purposely left this in because I wanted to show you how this works. The characters have XML files that correspond to these variables inside a player. So right now, Kalat, Nikos, Shenid, etc., all these guys have gold as a setting. We want reset anim to be a setting as well. And you can see that in my differences here. There's a bunch of differences for example, for Colat. This is the difference here where we put false in. So we want to start this at false. For Nikos, we want to put that in as well. I'm putting it underneath gold to be consistent. Technically, I found out there'd be another way around having to do this, but I want to show you how easy it is to add new variables to XML files. This might come in handy later for you. But in the meantime, this controls whether we should stop or not, basically. So there we've got that, and we've got player updated. Looking back at my list, I think the change here to character was a minor one that we don't need. Yeah, character really hasn't changed at all. But we have changed player position quite a bit. Player position has the new stop function that we need to add. I put that under move because I thought that would make the most sense. Stop basically just sets his moving to false. Very simple. Notice up here is moving is set depending on if the movement vector is in 0, and then it's set here and the direction is set from that. But in our case, we just want to set his moving to false. And that is it for player position, apparently. So then, moving on to session. Session is a very important file as well. Session.cs has a bunch of movement stuff in it that I found, and drawing functionality. So we want to be able to update the movement down here along with the lead character. We need to be updating that. And that should go in draw non-combat. And that's where we actually want to be doing the drawing of the characters. So I'm going to go down to draw non-combat. And right after elapsed time, elapsed second, I'm going to put the new draw NPCs function. Because I want to draw this before I draw the player, so the player draws on top of them. So I'm going to actually delete the old draw player NPCs in favor of mine because I've made some changes to it. And the new one is now here. This draws, it goes through the player entry, it draws, and it basically says, okay, here's the direction from the NPC player positions. Notice this is the one we made. And here's the screen position from that as well. Here's the direction from that. Then, very importantly, call reset animation here with whether or not it's moving. So we say dot is moving. And then we go into our switch statement, which is very similar to the drawing of the party leader switch statement. And just had to switch over to Reach because I'm on my junky computer, so bear with me for a second as we load up to see if this worked. And here he is following me. You can see here. Oops, what am I doing? Here we go. You can follow me around and everything is good. So that's about it. Those are the changes that I made, and hopefully you've learned a little bit about the game engine and the process of doing that, and where movement code is and all that kind of thing, and where variables are coming from inside of the XML, how to do a little bit of vector math, basic stuff like that. I'll show you this again working. Now, one further change I would have liked to have made, or I would like you to think about as well, is the guy currently that joins your party here, the Shendid, he comes from the bottom of the map. There's no reason we couldn't have him come from the top of the map. That's probably more likely a good solution for this. So, also this does work with arbitrary characters. You can see if we go down here, we actually get what is going on. Oops, I didn't want to exit. Well, I'll leave that for you guys to figure out. Basically, if you go down to the bottom, all I was going to show you is that the orc character that they have moves with you as well. Well, actually, I'll show it to you now. Really kind of simple stuff though, but okay, so we go past here. We're gonna go all the way past here. Accept that. Go past all this stuff. And then somewhere around here, I get this big baddie guy who follows behind me here. So that is that. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about the nature of this engine, and we will see you next time. Good luck on your game projects. Remember, we will be having a full game project description next week. Bye-bye.